today.
Yeah.
That's good. Imagine myself when we have
There you go. Yeah.
Because you get so
Oh,
I haven't even said anything yet.
we know it's going to be good.
Let's start with a prayer. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
friend, beloved God,
friend, beloved God,
great masters,
great masters,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashai,
Hailey Mahashai,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
and our beloved Guru,
and our beloved Guru,
Paramhansa Yogananda,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
saints of all religions,
saints of all religions,
we humbly bow at thy feet.
we humbly bow at thy feet.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
be with us in this gathering.
be with us in this gathering.
Help us to be channels
Help us to be channels
of thy infinite light.
of thy infinite light.
Flow through us
Flow through us
and purify us.
and purify us.
We are thy children.
We are thy children.
Bless us.
Bless us.
Om. Peace.
Peace.
Amen. Welcome, everybody. One chair left. I'm Joy, as all of you know, but we are recording this for posterity and possibly YouTube, so we'll see if that happens. Welcome to the first session of Joy Masters in Seattle. Some of you have already heard that some people at the village, some of the younger crowd, started a group called Joy Masters, and it's a takeoff on Toastmasters, which is basically a public speaking group. You're learning how to hone your skills as a public speaker. I don't know much about it, but they decided to do a spiritual version of that, and somebody came up with the name Joy Masters, which I think is adequate, and it's about sharing our light and sharing Master's teachings, and that's why we're here. So
It's
very, pardon?
It's being done in Assisi and
Palo Alto, Assisi, and I thought there was one more, but I can't think of that right at the second. So basically what we'll be doing is I'll do a quick introductory talk, hopefully quick. I didn't time myself when I was practicing, but I'll speak, and then we have 4 speakers that will come up and talk for 5 minutes each. And after that, we will have them all come up and we'll give them a blessing. And we have 2 visiting ministers here today, Hriman and Padma. And one or both of you can come up after that and just give some general feedback or say what inspired you, whatever comes to mind. And then if you would end with a prayer, that would be great. So that's the format. It may change as we go along. The village, they were doing 10 minutes when they started, and we thought maybe that's a little bit long if you're not used to speaking, if you're nervous, like I tend to get, and I blank out, so 5 minutes seemed doable to me. Some of you have heard this story. When I heard that they were doing the Joy Masters group at the village, I thought, oh man, that's the last thing that I want to do. And Bhakti and I talked about it a little bit, and I prayed about it, and I asked Master to give me a very clear sign if he wanted me to be a part of it. And 2 days later, I was in the community room, and Hriman and Padma came up to me and said, Joy, have you heard of the group at the village called the Joy Masters? We think someone should start one. So that was my sign.
Did you get a clear sign?
It was a little vague, but I read into things sometimes. So I took that as my sign, and a couple of us got together at the farm and talked about what would this look like and when can it happen, and here we are. So, I didn't watch my time. I don't want to go over it and keep you too long. But for me, just standing up here is not my first choice of things to do. So thank you for being here. And I was the type in college and high school that I would avoid public speaking like the plague. sort of faking my own death. I would fake illness. I think I asked my twin sister one time to do it for me. One time I videotaped myself and then played it. You know, I sat in the back and played the video of me speaking to the class. I would do anything I could so that they weren't looking at me. Handouts, overhead, movie clips, food, you know, just to keep people busy. So this is a really good place for me to be. I wanted to share just a quick story about this sort of thing. A couple springs ago, I was attending a conference for Education for Life at the Village, and about 5 minutes beforehand, it was in the Expanding Light Temple, and probably 30, 40, maybe 50 people were in there. And Nitai, the founder of Education for Life, came up to me and said, "Joy, are you feeling flexible?" And I said, "What do you mean, Nitai?" And he asked me to speak. I had been helping out in school, and he said, "Would you mind going up and being a speaker?" Somebody couldn't show up at the last minute, and fortunately Irene came over and said, "You can say no," because I just froze up and was like, "Oh my gosh, you're kidding me, I can't, you know, the fear just rose up in me very quickly. And I didn't do it, but part of my hope in being a part of this group is that if that situation were to come up again, I would say yes very cheerfully and go up there and do my best. So that's part of our purpose. My start in Ananda, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I began down in Southern California in the South Bay Center, which is in Torrance, and probably not quite a year after I joined, a couple ministers came down from the village, and they were doing a talk on Kriya. And I tried to sit in the back because, again, I tended to just want to be in the back and not up where people can see me. And it was Devarshi and Maria Warner. And Maria kind of looked in the back and said, "Oh, there's some seats up here, right up front, smack in the middle." And usually I would say, "Oh, no. But that day I thought, you know, I need something. There's a reason this is happening." So I sat right in front. And the talk was so magnetic, and it's recorded. I think I still have it. But what I got from that experience was watching them. So one would be sitting to the side and the other one would be speaking, and they would be looking at their spouse with so much love. It was palpable. I mean, I felt like I could reach out and touch it, and I also felt it coming to me. They were just radiating love, and that really impacted me greatly. And I think that as we go out, part of this practice is for us who will be doing outreach, ministry, teaching classes, that sort of thing, that I want us to be able to do that too, to radiate that love and master's love and joy and just sharing the light. So that's our opportunity today. You as the audience, we can both have both sides of it. We can give the love to the speakers, but you also get to receive the love that we have. And like Master says, the instrument is blessed by that which flows through it. So with great love, I want to hand this over to Steve.
Thank you very much, Joy. Welcome, everybody. My name's Steve, and I've been living here at the community for coming up on, I believe, 6 years. Yeah, maybe it's 5 years. I think now 2008, coming up on 6 years. It's all in the timing that our lives unfold. Without experience, we cannot hold. The ocean of spirit, which has no mold. Just listen to nature if you'd hear. I recently was watching a program on space, and the physicists and the mathematicians who know much more than I do said that the universe expanded exactly at the right time. Because if it had expanded 1/1,000,000th of a second too quickly, everything would not have had a chance to actually build on top of itself, that we'd be left with dust. And if it had expanded 1/1,000,000th of a second too slowly, nothing would have had time to expand outward far enough to get farthest away from that one tiny little point where the universe all began, and it would have collapsed back inwards on itself. So too, I find my life being somewhere, maybe not in a millionth of a second, but nonetheless, timing, I think, is the aspect of this I'd like to focus on. And when we think of the question at hand, how I found Ananda, I think how Ananda found me. Ananda's always been there. I mean, even from my foremost years, I remember amidst Ruth Montgomery and Edgar Cayce books, my mother always had that little orange book with a Spanish woman on it. And, you know, there's, even to a child, I remember she told me this story when I was apparently about 3 years old. She was reading a book about Ruth Montgomery and something about the teachings of Jesus. And I looked up at my mother and I said, the people in that book, they like me, don't they? And she was just like really taken aback. She's like, she's like, yes, they do. I was like, oh, okay. And I went on about my way. But I remember, you know, kind of falling to that stage, going out into the world, going out into the woods, and going into a band. I thought that was my entire life. You know, I dropped out of college. I basically gave up all the things that were otherwise spiritual to project myself into a position, playing music for people and traveling across the country. And, but you know, I had Melissa there. I've always had these elements that have kind of wrote me back in, you know. And I read the autobiography later in life. My mother gave it to me as I went off to college as a parting gift. And I read it and go, wow, this is an incredible book, you know? I mean, this is really awesome. I'm glad that somebody like found God. I mean, that's pretty cool. But it wasn't for me at that point. The timing wasn't right. Now, when I met Melissa years later, the timing was right for her. She got the book, and for her, you know, the brush was dry enough. It caught on like wildfire. And she started making the connection. She found the church in Seattle and started going. And so I would be in this kind of twofold world. I remember my first meditation actually at the temple, which is now Bengal Tiger on Roosevelt. I remember I went in, it was a 3-hour meditation, and I was not anywhere close to being ready for a 3-hour meditation. And I remember my side was like hurting. It must have been karma, I don't know, but I couldn't stay for more than about half an hour, and I ended up pulling her out of it. And it was all about the unsheathing. But what I did is I took Swami's books, I took more of Master's books, Man's Eternal Quest, and things on the road with me. And the music, I had some of Swami's music on my MP3 player. And it just kept cutting a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. And I started to see that not only was I living a lie, but you know, living with the foot in 2 boats doesn't work all that long. And they started to do this, and I was doing a yoga pose I hadn't yet learned. But I remember actually 2 talks being at Sunday service. I remember a few things, both involved Padma and Prem Shanti. I remember a talk that Padma gave where she said, be ready to turn on a dime. And it planted a small seed. Be ready to turn on a dime. I thought, okay. And then I remember Prem Shanti saying, are you going to be here when Swami's here? And I thought, who's this guy, Swami? You know, I was like, well, maybe. And she grabbed me by the hands and she said, you've really got to make it. It's, you know, it's really going to be great. And it did, I got it. And it changed something in me. And it cut just that much deeper in meeting Swami for the first time. And yet still being in these 2 worlds, there was a car crash that actually really lit things up, and I thought about Divine Mother's hand, casting a shadow before it graces the devotee. And looking back on that, I thought, you know, being there, being on an icy road, and one side was a ditch, which was probably much further and probably would have killed both of us. And the other side was a snowy embankment. And yet we landed, swirled off into the snowy embankment. And at that point, everything changed, perception-wise, because 2 days later, Carol called us and she said, will you come live with us at the community? And so thus began the great journey. And I was able to change my karma. After that, the last time I went on the road was my last tour. And I was able to just make an amazing transformation in my life that I never thought would have been possible. But I think the support of everybody who I've met and the continued support to stay on the path and to continue to inspire each other has been one of the greatest gifts of my entire life. So thank you very much. And I believe Hailey.
I'll just give you a little wave when it's 5 minutes because I don't want to disturb the people.
Hi, I'm Hailey, and I'm going to share with you also my story of coming to Ananda. There were several experiences I had, interactions with Ananda, and then I would leave and go do other things and then come back, so I'll just go through that a little bit. The first time I went to Ananda was February of 2010. I went to a first-timers retreat at the village, and it was just a really, it's like Steve was saying, the timing for all of these it was just right, and it was a good time for me, and I was open, and nothing else was coming in at that time, and it was really transformative, at least looking back it was. I thought, this was a very nice place, these are very nice people, this was a nice retreat, but I ended up actually leaving a day early so I could get a ride down to Los Angeles where Zach was, so that was still a little more important at the time. But I was able to, from that retreat, able to let go of a lot of things. I didn't worry so much anymore about what I was going to do. Was just in a flow, and moved to Los Angeles, and then we were swept away a couple months later to the mountains, which is where we got to live and work for a summer, and met some wonderful people there who kept me on this journey. We met a really good friend who we ended up following after the season down to Baja, Mexico, and before we knew it, we were going to church every Sunday and serving with this community and going on these trips and doing outreach. And so a seed had been planted, and it had started to get a little water, being in a community and serving others. And then we came back, and I came here, and I took Raja in January of 2011. And that really gave me the tools that I needed to know how to be happy, and where I could catch myself sooner when I knew I was getting off track. Oh gosh, I know I'm not supposed to think like this. I kind of go somewhere and you can't, you know better. You can't really go back. You want to go down this road, but you can't. You know too much now. And then we went back to the mountains a second season, and both seasons, I feel like I really fell in love with nature and fell in love with the plants, and knew that it was where I was supposed to work for both of us, and that kept growing. And as much as it was really tempting to just stay up in the mountains, we're in this paradise in the high country, and even now I think about it, and it's a little painful to think about because it was such a paradise, but we knew we had to come down and do the work, and wanted to build a bridge with what we felt up there, this harmony in nature with connecting in a way that it was serving people, and growing food seemed to be the obvious connection there. We all have to eat, and there was this huge balance between up in the mountains seeing the harmony and coming down into the farmland, and it was just, we were not being very nice to the earth. So we decided to start down that path of growing food, and so we were introduced to a farmer in the mountains by a good friend of ours, and immediately after that season went down and started learning to farm. After about a month of that farm, I got to go back to the village and go to YTT, yoga teacher training, and I met Bhakti there this time, yeah. And that was, again, just the perfect right thing. I had been up in the mountains, very open, being in the mountains really felt like you were literally and in other ways above everything else, where you didn't think about things, very few material possessions, no advertisements, just all these things that we're bombarded with all the time where it's just not present, and you have more clarity. And so I got to go to the village and be in this very open state, and they let me camp. They said usually you have to go inside, but they told me I could stay outside, so I got to live outside for half the year, which was great. And that was really life-changing as well. I had probably the best month of my life. I learned so much and was really touched by the people there, and how you could just feel everyone's love and their service, and it was just a wonderful place to be. And then we came back up here and started serving our families. I was here helping my mom, and Zach went to St. Louis, and eventually I went over there too, and we just knew we were supposed to be serving and helping, and we weren't really thinking about what am I going to do, but we saw places that needed help, and so we started helping. And then my mom called me and said Hriman wanted to know what we were doing, and they were looking for a farm. And we thought, well, we're looking to farm, and this seems like an ideal situation, a group of people that I had felt really good about were looking to go down this journey that I was also looking to go down. So we started coming around more and getting involved and helping a little in the gardens, and then we went back to the village and got to be there for a month, did the Living with Spirit program, and got to help for a week with the movie. And I was, again, really touched by the people there. And one thing that stood out to me was meeting so many people. Everybody was so themselves and doing what it seemed like they all felt really good about, but they were all so unique and individual. But there was still something holding them all together, but you couldn't pick out that group of people and put them all together. You just wouldn't know. And I was really touched by that and thought, well, this is good. I'm not the sort of person that can just conform and kind of go in line. So I thought, well, this is a place where I can still be myself and be creative, but have a greater community. So now we have a farm, and the seed was planted, and we are now harvesting, and there's still a lot of work to do, but very grateful to be here.
Welcome. Thank you all for being here. My heart is pounding like this. Do my best. I was thinking about where to start on my timeline when I thought about how I got to Ananda. And I was living in Hawaii at this time, and I was living on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The lava was flowing about a mile away. I was eating coconuts and pineapples and mangoes and noni fruit, and just every day practicing my Ashtanga practice and my Vipassana practice. And so I would get up and meditate and do yoga and eat coconuts and meditate and do yoga and eat coconuts and meditate and do yoga, eat coconuts. And it was wonderful. It was a beautiful life. It was kind of really, I was in the jungle. It was wild. And I had a machete. But there's just something missing. And I remember having the thought, I don't want to just live this life for myself anymore. I want to live this life solely to help others. That's it. And I think that's kind of, I know it was all happening even up to that point, but I think somewhere in that thought, it kind of propelled me even deeper. And fast forwarding about a few months, I found myself back on the mainland, and I walked into my friend's restaurant, and there was this boy sitting at the table, and it was just this instant knowing, like, I know you. And he kind of took me in, and a week later I moved in, and I think it was Master trying to fast forward me to get here by moving in so soon with him. But I was continuing to do my practice, but I noticed that he was doing his particular practice. And at the time he was a devotee of Master through SRF, and he would be sitting on his wool blanket with his headphones and his own board and doing his techniques that I just was not familiar with, but something about it just drew me. And I asked him one day, he never said anything, he never mentioned anything about who his guru was. I saw all the pictures, I knew of Yogananda, and I was reading the autobiography of the time, but I didn't really know much. And I asked him, can I sit next to you on your wool blanket and meditate with you? And he said, yeah, of course. And I sat down, and this went on for weeks and months, and finally he said, do you want to learn the energization exercises? And I said, I do. And so he taught me, and then he asked me if I wanted to learn Hong Sa, and he taught me Hong Sa, and then during all this time we had a really good friend, you all might know him, some of you might know him, Kalidas from the village, and Melody just had a baby. He was at Ananda, and he was kind of trying to lure us to Ananda, just kind of ever so gently, and we decided, okay, let's go and check it out. We'll go to do karma yoga. So we went to karma yoga, and it was just so beautiful and really connected with Trimurti, and it just felt so right. So we took discipleship there in the little Lahiri temple with Trimurti, and came back and just practiced where we were at. And then about 6 months later, I went back to the village and I got Kriya. And I remember going up after getting Kriya the next day at Sunday service, going up to get a blessing, and I went up to Trimurti and he blessed me and put his finger on my forehead, and then he touched my forehead like this. And it was just like I just knew, like this was my family, I just knew. It was so perfect. And I went home and I just felt all this bliss in my heart. And I don't know when on the timeline this happened, but I remember Michael saying to me, he was my partner at the time, he said, I didn't want to say this to you because I didn't want to scare you or influence you in any way, but when we were up on 2 trees, there's this mountain with like 2 trees on it in Ventura. It's really beautiful, you can go hiking up to it. We were sitting up there. I think it was like one of the very first times we spent time together. He said, when I was looking in your eyes, I saw a master there, and I was 99% sure he was your guru, but I didn't want to say anything. And so he didn't, and he didn't say anything. He didn't tell me what he was doing, he just let me unfold. And we stayed in Ventura for a couple of years. Kalidas over that time kept trying to get us to come to Ananda. He would call us like every month. So, are you guys gonna come to Ananda? Oh, maybe. So, Ananda's a really great place to live. Are you gonna come? He was just really trying to get us to come. And finally, we wanted to, but we weren't sure. There was this kind of like, yes, no, I don't know. And finally, it's funny how things happen, but our landlord came up to us and said, we're going to bulldoze, we're going to level your whole backyard, and we're going to build another house. And it's some sort of tapasya when you're trying to meditate and there's this bulldozer outside your meditation window. And it was like, I think it was that very day we looked at each other and were like, it's time to go to Ananda. And so it was kind of a month before we decided to go, and I was still kind of like, there was these feelings of unsureness coming up, and I don't know what happened, and I didn't know what to do, and I went down to LA. A friend invited me down, and he asked me, do you want to go see where Master's buried, or do you want to go, and I forgot what other place he talked of, and I said, oh, I want to go to where he's buried. And so we went over there, and I just sat in front of his tomb, his rock, where it says his name on it, and I just sat there, and it was like it became real, and I just started crying and crying and crying, and I knew my train was going to leave in like 10 minutes, but it was like I was there and I couldn't go, and I just wanted to stay, and finally I was like, I have to go, and we drove as fast as we could to the train station, and I thought I was going to miss my train, and I got there and it wasn't there, and I was like, oh, I missed it, and then I heard a man on his phone saying, oh, the train's late, and I was like, oh, Master, that was you. And so yeah, about maybe a couple weeks later, Michael and I decided, we need to go on our own journeys, and so he went to the village, and I went to a friend's house and healed from our separation, and then found myself at the meditation retreat, and met Ananda and did a seclusion, and then went into karma yoga, and that's how I got there.
Thank you.
Okay, get some up. Oh, we have my book right there. You guys probably haven't heard of this. Obscure book that I found. Well, hello everyone. I'm Rocky. Like Joe was explaining, speaking in front of people has been something that I've avoided like the plague as well, and have definitely had a lot of fear about doing. So that's why when you asked me to do this, I knew it was the right thing, and I needed to face this fear. So how I found Ananda, what a blessing to be able to even speak about this topic. You know, just I feel so blessed to be here today to talk to you guys about this. So I guess just to put in a little bit of context and give you some reference for how I found Ananda. My whole life I kind of battled with anxiety and depression, and about 2008 I really hit bottom. It's kind of like that saying, the night is always darkest just before the dawn, and I felt like, you know, it was at that point. Most of you know I'm a musician by trade, and have been touring and traveling around quite a bit. And you know, I think I was drawn to music and the healing arts because of the depression and anxiety that I experienced. So in 2008, I really, like I said, I reached a point where I felt like life just wasn't worth living anymore. I didn't think I could go on. And so I started a real serious search for truth at that point. And I started with a book called The Tao Te Ching, and that book had a real impact on me. And then I read a book called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And then I started opening up to some deeper truths, and I studied the life of Gandhi, actually. And that was where I first heard the word Ananda. And as soon as I read that word, I just, something clicked, and I knew. I was like, wait, this is really special. I had an affinity with the word. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was meaningful, and especially to me. So I just went and searched it on the internet, and the first website that came up was Little Blue Temple in Bothell. And I saw the little temple, and I didn't know what it was. It looked mysterious to me. I was like, is this a Muslim temple? I don't know what this is. So I decided to give a call down to the temple, and I'll never forget it because Nivriti answered, and she was the first person I spoke with, and it was just so touching and meaningful. And I just remember our conversation and just feeling really impacted, and so I was really excited. It was in Bothell, and I live in Woodinville, was living there at the time, and I decided to go over and investigate and check it out. And that's where I bought a copy of Autobiography of Yogi, and then I just started reading it. I read it over and over, and it had even more of a deep impact on me than the Tao Te Ching, which was probably the most impactful book I was reading at the time to discover some deeper truths. And you know, I just knew it was for me. I'd already began to experiment with meditation a little bit, and didn't really know what I was doing at all. Just kind of, as Swami said, staring cross-eyed at the wall a little bit. But I was getting somewhere with it. You know, I was having some real peace, and just kind of seeing through some of the materialistic viewpoints that I had carried up to that point. And you know, I remember reading the chapter on cosmic consciousness, and I just felt like at that point it was the only place where I was getting some real answers to my questions. I just knew that he knew, that he had the answers to everything that I was asking. And I just want to read just one little piece of this, because I remember sitting on my couch, and when I got to the chapter on experiencing cosmic consciousness, this kind of really solidified that meditation was the way for me, and that it explained some of the experiences I was having, and helped me to understand where I was going on the path. But it just says, the breath and the restless mind I saw were like storms which lashed the ocean of light into waves of material forms. No perception of the infinite as one light could be had except by calming those storms. As often as I silenced the two natural tumults, I beheld the multitudinous waves of creation melt into one lucent sea, even as the waves of the ocean, their tempest subsiding, serenely dissolve into unity. And I felt like, he really described what I was starting to just barely have a glimpse of in my meditations, and I just knew I wanted to run towards that light and understanding. And so I started coming to the services, and at Ananda, it was so much different from what I experienced at all of the Christian churches that I grew up in. I grew up down in Texas, and I went to a lot of Southern Baptist churches, and there was just a lot of dogmatism, a lot of your typical run-of-the-mill misunderstandings of the teachings of Christ. And I was attending a church before Ananda, a local Christian church, and there was this dogmatism was there, and I was just unsure. And I remember when I left that church, this was many years earlier, but I remember the reason I left, and it had an extreme impact on my faith in general, was that I knew that they weren't teaching me the truth. And I went to the pastor and I asked this question. I said, what happens? I remember they were speaking really strongly about the light, the truth, and the way, and this being the only path to God. And that was a major hang-up for me, because I just didn't resonate with it. And so I asked the pastor, so what happens to all the other people who, what about the Native Americans? What about people who didn't get exposed to the teachings of just Jesus of Nazareth? And his answer to me was, well, he thought about it for a minute, and then he said, there's some things that we're just not supposed to know. You really shouldn't ask that question. And I was just instantly, I was like, wow, that's wrong. I got to leave this place, And so I left the church, and I kind of spiraled into darkness at that point, because I trusted that as my place of to go to for counseling and understanding, and I kind of lost my faith in general. And then I remembered when I read the autobiography, I remember Yogananda saying, I think it was him who said that truth is unafraid of questions. And that's how I felt. I wanted to be able to ask these hard questions and get an answer. And I was getting that answer from Yogananda. So here we are 5 years later. I've taken discipleship and now know Kriya. And I'm judging my life much more on the results of these practices and what I've seen in terms of just joy and peace and inner freedom and harmony. And I really believe this is the path for me. And I'm so grateful to all of you for all your support along the way and helping to reel me in as my feet, like Steve said, still feel like they're a little bit in two boats as I'm navigating my life with my family and my work outside of Ananda. But I do feel firmly on this path, and I'm so grateful to all of you. And I just want to end with a quote that from Swami Sri Yukteswar, which when I read the book, this was one of the most impactful things to me, which, to come out of such a dark place and start on this path towards light and truth was just that he said to forget the past, the vanished lives of all men are dark with many shames. And that human conduct is ever unreliable until anchored in the divine. And if you're making a spiritual effort now, that all things in future will improve.
up now and we will give you a blessing. Come, Rocky. And let's take this. Let's see if we get you
Brothers and sisters.
scooch in a little bit. I don't know if you're on my camera or not.
Oh,
It's okay.
which way?
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, let's envision Bhakti, Rocky, Steve, and Hailey surrounded in Master's light, sharing it with the world, full of love and joy. And we'll give them 3 peace. And we got a lot of and finally, we would like to invite Hriman and or Padma to come up and give us some comfort. They're pointing at each other. You guys can sit down.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you,
Joy,
Joy.
for organizing it.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Oh, my big notebook out here.
Oh, a couple of thoughts came to mind. What great talks. Great insights. Congratulations to you all. It's just delightful to feel the vibration of each person when they're speaking. You can really see it come out. A couple of thoughts just about the talks. You probably noticed that it's almost impossible to give a 5-minute talk. Okay? It's much harder to give a 5-minute talk than a 10-minute talk.
I've never given one.
Yeah. Just ask my husband. No, it's very, very difficult to get concise in that short amount of time. When Joyce said it at the beginning, I thought, ha.
We thought it would be easier. But
Yeah, no, it's much harder. 10 minutes is the minimum, really, and usually it takes maybe 15 to get all your thoughts across, but 10 definitely is the minimum. I noticed a couple of you, actually I think all of you in one way or another, had a start-off point. You had a little story, a poem, some little thought that got you going, or some little, story that got you going. And that's a great technique for when you're sharing, because that gets you right into your heart with something familiar, and then from that point it can sort of, you can go. I want to just congratulate all of you on getting to the essence of what it was that drew you to Ananda. And because, especially giving it in a short talk like that, you have to really rope it in, don't you? You have to get it down to the relevant, what's really important. And clearly each of you had thought about 1 or 2 or 3 key things, and you just revolved your story around that, or else you would have gone on for half an hour, right? But you all did a really fantastic job. Thank you very much.
I think it was 30 years ago this month. We were in Europe at the beginning of Ananda's work, and what's that place called in the mountains?
Como.
Como. Well, yeah, it's up in the mountains. And we were there with our 2 children who were they're like this. And one morning, one of the people turned to us or me and said, "You want to teach a meditation class?" It was 1984. And I could have easily have taught it, I'm sure, but I just wasn't ready, because many of you, each of you mentioned timing is everything. And when that timing is right, which I feel from all of you, you step into it even if you're not ready. And I think back because, frankly, I was just unwilling. I thought I was on vacation. and at that time. But it always stuck with me because I missed an opportunity, which even I knew was always my dharma. Even as a child, I would give speeches. And yet, when that was not funny. I mean, I always knew that would be my dharma, but when the time came, notwithstanding that, and even experience when I was younger, I was still also very nervous. One time, I was sitting in the front row, like Larry, there at a Mahasamadhi celebration in the Expanding Light Temple, and Swami had done this beautiful program. The place was pin drop silent at the very end, and for whatever reason, from the dais, he says, I was Terry then, Terry, would you do the closing prayer? I was like, oh my God. You know? So I started off, and I couldn't remember one of the gurus' names.
I had to feed him the gurus' names. Larry Mahasha.
Yeah, that was the guy.
So Sri Yukit's were
Yeah. In other words, it doesn't matter whether we're nervous. When it's ours to do, you feel it, and each of you have said that tonight. The other thing I've seen that if it's yours to do your best, and it doesn't really matter, you know, how smooth your delivery is, how much you know about the subject. I have seen time and time again a wide range of Ananda speakers in different places, that everybody has people that they touch. Doesn't matter whether I thought someone maybe did a poor job, I'd overhear someone say, oh, that he or she was talking just to me. And where I'm going with that thought, because it was helpful to me, is that what we have to share is so much bigger than ourselves. And if it's right to us, we just make the effort, and the results will speak for themselves. One of the worst things to do is to compare yourself to other people, or to think that you can't, because we can. And that's something that Swami's taught all of us. And the four of you today, it's obvious you can. And I think it's just as obvious you will.
I want to say it's the 5 of you today, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, I didn't count. Yes. Because we do have a great work to share, and you all have that to carry on. And some of us are looking forward to that.
I don't know if you've had the opportunity, but from the other centers, they do tape all of this. And I've watched some of it, and I was present at the village visiting Tulsi and got to go and attend one of the evenings. And there, every single one of them are just so insightful and so delightful to watch. So do watch what others are doing too. It's really quite fun.
Thank you.